Hello, everyone. Dobry Densian. I'm trying to speak in Russian. Uh, Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor to present here in this international work conference, Modern Network Technologies, Monetec 2020. My name is Cesar Marcondes. I'm from Brazil, and I would like to present this paper on IoT, Highly Interactive Honeynets Architecture with Controllable Malware Propagation for IoT. Thanks very much for the invitation and everything. So let's get started. So my name is Cesar Marcondes. I'm from Brazil. I did my PhD at UCLA in United States in 2008. And since then, I'm being a professor in Brazil. I'm a professor in the Aeronautics Institute of Technology, ITA. It's a very prestigious university in Brazil. This year, for example, is considered the best Brazilian computer science engineering course in the whole country. So I work a lot on testbeds, experimental testbeds, Future Internet, SDN, since 2010. And my previous projects were European projects and Brazil projects, joint work with European partners on the Fibre, is a Future Internet, Brazil and Europe, and NECOS, the Novel Enablers Cloud Slicing. So these are the projects that I work on, Future Internet. I have lots of interests. Currently, due to the nature of my institution, the Aeronautics Institute of Technology, that's a military institution providing computer science engineering courses. I have a strong interest on networks and security. In my talk, I will show you some of this preliminary work that I have been doing here in the ITA. So my talk is about IoT. So it's very important to provide you some context of IoT. IoT is very pervasive. It's everywhere nowadays, and you can find it in a wearable tech like a smartwatch. You can have smart appliances. Healthcare also have a lot of devices that are connected, interconnected. So the idea is that this Internet of Things is just growing. There's an explosion of possible connectivity. So, for example, this chart here shows in 2020 already 50 billion Internet of Things connected to the Internet, and summing up the cell phones, summing up smart devices, summing up set-top box at home, smart TVs, etc. So IoT is really everywhere, and as much as much devices you have, as much sensors you have also lots of application controls for these devices. So there's also a very high growth of not only sensor devices, but also applications that control these devices. For example, in 2020, you can find it in any market store, cell phones market store, more than 5 million applications that are used by these IoT devices. And these applications are usually, they are run on the cloud, and they collect information from the IoT devices, and this information is available to the user very easily, very handy, everywhere. So you have this connectivity everywhere, from the IoT devices to the cloud, and this leads to a larger security surface of attacks for bad guys. To show you in context what's going on, what's happening. So there is this report of Nozomi Security, specifically related to IoT. And this report has a title, The Rise of the IoT Botnets. The botnet is basically a network of compromised devices that are in control by one hacker or a group of hackers through hidden ways of communication, through a hidden way of command and control. So there has been a very large problem. This has been a very large problem. For example, in the past few months, few years, there was a Mirai malware that infected lots of cameras in the internet, and these cameras came to attack, for example, the domain.com and the domain, lots of domains, in order to try to drop the internet. So in 2020, the problem is not even further to be resolved. So into 2020, we had 5.8 billion enterprises and automotive devices expected to be connected to the internet this year. So in addition to the 50 billion, we are increasingly getting more and more devices. And that's very important. 98% of all the IoT traffic is unencrypted. So this means there's a large surface of attack here, right? Here there's some of the names of the most prominent IoT botnets, like Mirai, Mukashi, Dark Nexus, Litz 57% of the IoT devices are vulnerable to medium and severe attacks, according to the CVE level of attacks. So in this year, because of the pandemic, the problem gets even worse, because lots of people are at home, working from home with VPN connections. We had an increase tenfold of ransomware, and this increase is also increased the amount of people that paid ransomware. There are some cases that, for example, the Garmin, the GPS company that sells this Fitbits smartwatches for fitness, and they seem to get some really bad problem with ransomware. And according to media, probably they have paid the ransomware. So the amount of ransomware paid increased tenfold. And the online crimes are in rise because of all this, activity in-house. This activity in-house, it increases more and more the number of attacks. Before the pandemic was about like 10,000 attacks per day. Now it's more than 4,000 attacks per day. So there's a rise of IoT botnets, and IoT is really critical because IoT, you have lots of devices. So according to this, if you interpolate for the future, maybe in the future we will have the internet of ransomware things, where things are going to demand be paid in order to do things. Like, for example, this refrigerator. Yeah, you're hungry? Oh, pay up and I will unlock my door. So you cannot unlock the door of the refrigerator unless you pay the ransomware, or $20 on my PayPal account, or I will only brew decaf. So maybe the person doesn't like decaf. I don't like decaf, so I will pay $20 for a normal regular coffee, and so on. So you see that all these devices, they are open, and they are using unencrypted traffic, and they are very vulnerable because the firmware is old. The firmware has some issues, and the issues are not very easy fixed, because you would need to upgrade these devices, and usually people are not technical savvy to upgrade a camera, or an AC, air conditioner, or any other device. So it's very complicated. In order to know that this problem is going on in a company, in an enterprise, in an institution, it's very important to have a project inside of the enterprise that promotes security awareness. So we got to understand and know what types of attacks are happening in our nearby us. So this type of security awareness is possible using security tools to bring the traffic of these malicious activities to you, and let the malicious activity infect you, in order to understand what's going on, how is attacking, what's the objective. If the attacks are more related to common attacks like ransomware, maybe you can discover this very easily and find the security patches to correct the problem on your devices. But maybe the attack is direct to you, and if it's an advanced persistent threat, if it's an attack that's a more advanced, that's done by a nation sponsored group, research group that's doing this malware. So then you need to understand this. You need to understand what type of attacker is behind the attacks that are going on in your vicinity, in nearby. And the way to do it, this security awareness, is, for example, using honeypots. Honeypots are dedicated computational resources that you let them be probed and attacked and compromised. In the other hand, you have honeynets. Honeynets are network designed specifically to be compromised by these malwares, right? This thing is the device, and this thing is a network. And when you are doing a network, a honeynet, and you're doing this network, you are got infected, and this virus in this malware, you could infect other devices. So it's very complicated to have a honeynet, because you need to create some control mechanisms to prevent the malware to be replicated against other networks, right? And in the case of honeypots, there are also the two categories of honeypots. There are the low interaction category and the high interaction category. The low interaction category is the one that usually you just collect the malware, the attack, and see what commands the attack is trying to do, but you do not execute the commands. In the other hand, in the high interaction, you let the malware do its thing. So in this way, the malware, is going to try to communicate with the command and control of the hacker that's controlling the botnet. The malware is going to try to infect your machine, persist, and all these type of activities. So this table shows like the feature of how low and interaction, works out. So low interaction is easy to install, but it's hard to install in high interaction, because you need a more sophisticated system to not only let the logs of the commands, but also let the application of the malware to execute inside your environment. So according to this table, you see that the high interaction is something that you would like to have, but it's very difficult, because it's very dangerous to have a high interaction, because the attacker can compromise the honeypot. And if the attacker compromises the honeypot, maybe he can attack your network where the honeypot is seated, right? And the attacker can have a real operating system access, so he can try to do a lateral movement and collect passwords and all sorts of stuff that's very dangerous. So although we would like to have a high interaction honeypot, it's very complicated. And because of this problem, we thought that maybe a way to do it is to design a honeypot and honeynet where we could control the malware and control the propagation of the malware and control the communication of the malware. So the idea here is called HonIoT, and the HonIoT is a highly interactive Honeynet architecture with this controllable malware propagation, feature. So the main goals are a new modular Honeynet architecture. I will show you the architecture that can control the spread of the malware to IoT devices, support either the real equipments or emulated equipments. So this is how you supposed to get a high interactive environment, and leverage SDN in order to control how the traffic is going to be redirected from the IoT compromised device to the internet or to other devices. And this way you can provide a sandbox environment for a complete infection, propagation, and study the impact of the malware would have on the internet. So we studied several other works. So we found out lots of shortcomings on the related works. As you can see, most of the related works are low interactive honeypots. And these low interactive honeypots, they are usually just logging the commands or emulating the banners so that you can lure the malware to come to you and try to infect you. And some other related work are more high interactivity, but they need like two networks to operate, and they need to replicate every device with an extra device to be attacked. So there's a high cost with duplications. And also the solutions are based on specific services. For example, the IoT pot is based on Telnet, right? So, and finally, there's an absence of containment mechanisms. So neither of these honeypots or honeynets, they have a containment mechanism that you can, propagate the malware in a controlled fashion. This way, we come up with this HonIoT design. And sorry, some of the words are written in Portuguese, but the idea here is we have a SDN controller that's connected to the internet, and the network SDN network that's connected to the internet. Here's the SDN controller. We have real IoT devices connected to this network. So this way, we can intercept traffic and do all the SDN work using the muscles of SDN to control how the traffic is redirected. We will do like this analyzer of the traffic. That's some feature inside the controller that will analyze where the traffic is going on. If the traffic is going on to the command and control, I would like to do to the malware to keep it going, because the command and control is very important, because it shows like commands. It needs some updates. It needs some new payloads. You have to let that go, while you don't want the malware to attack other machines, like do a scan, do swipe scan. So in the end, we also create emulated the internet, creating on-demand containers so that the malware perceives, that's connecting to the internet, connecting to some DNS, trying to attack some specific machine, a web machine. So in this way, you can create, a very high interactive but controlled environment. Here I show you all the flows. So the flow 1 is to internet to IoT. Flow 2 is IoT to the internet. If the control, is going through command and control, and then you let the IoT device communicate to the internet, because this is very important. It needs to communicate with the hacker to understand what's the stages that the attack is going on. But if the malware is trying to attack other machines, try to exploit other vulnerabilities of other machines, try to scan the rest of the network, let it do its thing. So basically, we packet in the packets of the attack, and as the attack is going on, because the attack, we don't know what the malware wants, we create on-demand containers with specific profiles like web, RPC, etc., so that the controller redirects that communication of the malware with these containers, and then let it execute the attack on those containers. This way, the containers are going to reply like a web login page, for example, a telnet page, for example. And we will need to have a catalog of services pre-instantiated or instantiated on demand, right? So this is the main IoT, HonIoT design that we come up with. There are several additional design challenges on this environment, because we are doing some work on real IoT here, and the traffic of real IoT is going through the network. Maybe it's hard to get an introspection of the real device, right? Differently than like a Cuckoo sandbox, for example. In a Cuckoo sandbox, it's a sandbox to run malwares for Windows. So it creates automatically a virtual machine for Windows. You put the malware inside, and then it does some checkings of the static and dynamic analysis of the malware. This is completely different. So maybe what we need to have is, maybe we can have the real devices, but maybe we could have also the emulated IoTs, because when you have emulated IoTs, we could get more information on the type of attack or vulnerability that's trying to do. In special, if it's doing some persistences and attacks and other dynamics, we could capture it even more. And this is a show like a Kemu machine with our ARM processor and a Beagle board. So it's a sort of a programmable way to do emulated IoT devices. Another challenge is the way that we assume the communication with the command and control is through an analysis on the controller of the span house's botnet controller list. So a particular subset of IPs that are related to bot control, command and control of botnets. But maybe a new malware doesn't do that. Maybe a new malware do a different thing. So another approach that we think is using syscall trace, and look at this syscall trace and try to do a machine learning approach of NLP, natural language processing of this approach, and try to come up with system calls of networks that are what I call benign, and system calls of the network what I call malign. But benign would be a system call that you go to the command and control to get new orders or to get new payloads. And the system calls that are maligned are the ones that you're trying to attack or scan other networks, other people networks. So you don't want that, because you're in a control environment. If the malware is doing attack from your network, you're responsible. You're responsible for that. We did this study on this area of NLP. Actually, the study was different than the study of system calls like this. We did a reproduction of a paper from the Usenix Security 2017 that they do basically sequence learning of instructions in assembly instructions to find out from a binary what are the parameters of functions and what are the types of the parameters, if it's an int, if it's a float, if it's a char, right? They do it using a GRU, a gate recurrent unit, and we redesigned their model, and we designed a new model with a more less use of resources for the embeddings. So the embeddings of their model is about like 3 gigabytes of disk, and ours is 3 megabytes of storage, because we do instead of considering every word of the programming language, we consider bytes as our words, and we encode that with this long short-term memories, and you got similar results. So this is a very interesting result of an NLP, use it in the context of a language, and we would like to use it later in these syscall traces in order to find out what are like benign system calls for command and control, what is malign system calls that are doing real bad things like attacks. We also experimented this setup, this design idea. So we created a small prototype based on the SDN, very simple SDN, LXD for the containers, and OpenFlow and Ryu controller, a Python based controller. And here we connect a honeypot, or we could connect an IoT here, and here's the internet. So using this setup, here's our testbed. We studied the scalability performance of this environment, and the scalability performance showed that as the number of containers increase, right, the memory footprint, for example, scales not completely linear because to Docker overheads, but it scales roughly linear, right? But for example, you could have hundreds of containers in a single machine, like with 1 gigabyte of RAM. In another study, we look at the startup times of the containers, and the startup times of the container were not very good. Were like 4 seconds, for example, to start up a container, LXD container with web, with a database or whatever that's the malware is trying to attack. And this could lead to timeouts of the malware, or could lead to a suspected behavior from the malware. So one idea here is we need to pre-instantiate, but as the number of containers grow, the number of seconds, is somehow amortized. Finally, we do some tests of bursts of creations of containers, because sometimes the malware is trying to do like a scan, like a nmap scan, and these nmaps can easily be very fast done in a whole network. So we need to create in bursts, and we found that bursts are complicated because we have some losses of some of the containers. We try to schedule like 30 containers. We couldn't in a single bunch because of some overheads of pre-allocations. So that's it. Basically, our paper is about the honeypots, the HoneyIoT, our design that try to expose the honeypots to malwares available to the internet, and we try to ensure the spread of the malware by creating an emulated internet. This way, you provide the environment for monitoring the actions. We monitoring the network actions. We could monitoring also the system operating system actions, right? And we show some preliminary results on scalability. We intend to continue this work. We investigate more sophisticated ways to identify the attack, if it's attack or a communication or command control, using SDN to the first packet to be sent. Also create like the container, some optimization on that space, syscall tools, pre-configure containers, scalability, and test in a real environment, like maybe capturing Mirai IoT botnet and try to understand how does it propagate, how fast it propagates, and more large questions for this. Okay, thank you very much for everything, and I'm open to answer questions.